This was a time when I was growing up in New York. We actually had a summer house on Cape Cod and spent every other weekend there, if we could. Cape Cod is a peninsula off the coast of Massachusetts. It becomes very busy, even crowded during summertime. But during the winter season, it becomes empty. The majority of houses in our area are owned as summer houses. So during winter, the houses are of course still there, but the people are not. In contrast to New York, there are only street lamps on the single main road in this town. The main road goes from the town center to the beach. Aside from this road, all the others are dark and very black at night. Also, Cape Cod extends out into the Atlantic from the mainland, forming Cape Cod Bay. Not only can one watch the sunrise over the Atlantic Ocean, but can also watch the sunset over Cape Cod Bay on any given clear day. Another effect of being surrounded by ocean is that there is very little man-made light at night. The stars are so clear that the Milky Way is clearly visible spanning across the sky on clear nights. The story took place during the vacation period between Christmas and New Year's. The Christmas celebrations were over, and we had plenty of leftover turkey and pumpkin pie. But that evening we were all feeling a bit of cabin fever from holiday food and family time. My older sister, who was 20 at the time, 7 years older than me, suggested we take a walk to the harbor, which was about a 20-minute walk from our house. The harbor can be quite enjoyable because you can walk out onto the docks and among the boats. Though I felt a bit uneasy about walking around a deserted beach town on a cold winter night, I thought it would be a fun way to get out of the house and perhaps even a little exciting. We set out, heading across the street from our classic Cape Cod cottage, where there was a field with a forest at the far end. At night, I often felt a hint of fear that someone might be watching from that tall grass, perhaps the usual scary thought of a person with an axe. While this thought kept me on edge, I knew it was just my imagination. Still, the icy wind rustling through the tall grass, combined with the moonless sky and a million sparkling stars, created the perfect setting for a horror story. We walked out to the main road, turned down a side street, and headed toward the harbor. This side street ran alongside the back of a long hotel, more of a 2-story motel painted light yellow that had a pool. In the summer, it's bustling with activity, but on this December evening, the hotel was closed for the season, dark and boarded up for protection. My sister remarked that a hotel spanning an entire block, but partially boarded up, reminded her of a horror movie, one of those slasher films where all the characters make the wrong decisions and find themselves in the worst situations. At the end of the street with the hotel, we continued left down a long road and dipped through the woods toward the harbor. This wasn't a dense forest. There were houses set back from the road with occasional driveways marked by reflectors on rocks, fences, or metal sticks. These reflectors usually bounce back the headlights from cars. I mention this because on this night we couldn't see any of them. It was pitch black and the road seemed to vanish into the darkness ahead of us. In fact, we hadn't seen a single car or person since leaving the house, and my nerves were more on edge than usual. I was only 13 at the time. Despite my nerves screaming at me, I tried to stay calm to appear tough in front of my sister. The woods alongside the road were particularly unsettling. The trees pressed right up to the asphalt, providing many hiding spots for someone or something. The houses beyond the woods were dark, as vacationers rarely come here in the winter. I noticed my sister also seemed uneasy. That's when I felt it, a shiver running up the back of my neck, making my hair stand on end. It's a feeling I get when I sense someone watching me, a sensation that I still experience today. We were midway through the wooded area, heading down the hill toward the harbor when my sister suggested we turn back. She just said, "It's late, maybe we don't need to go all the way to the harbor." I agreed. "Yeah, it's pretty creepy and dark down here." My neck felt cold, and I struggled to maintain a relaxed demeanor as my body wrestled between fight or flight. My sister responded, "Yeah, very creepy. let's just head back to the house. We can visit the harbor tomorrow. We turned around and she grabbed my hand, walking quickly up the hill. I remember her grip was so tight it almost hurt, something she never did. As we neared the end of the wooded area, my sister suddenly just shouts, "I've got a knife. I'm not afraid to use it." She maintained her fast pace all while saying this. We crossed the street and returned to the area behind the closed motel. My sister kept speed walking, glancing back with a look of panic. She told me, "Don't look back." I was terrified at this point. Despite the eerie atmosphere and my own growing panic, I hadn't seen anything unusual, except for my sister's alarming behavior. Then she says, "When I say run, you run, okay?" "Okay," I replied. We were almost at the main road, just a block from our street when she shouted to run. We sprinted as fast as we could. She let go of my hand and we both raced toward home. I could hear our footsteps pounding on the asphalt and other footsteps echoing behind us. We cut across the grass to a shortcut running through our neighbors' front yards to reach our house. We made it. We locked the storm door, which is mostly glass, and took a moment to catch our breath. The transition from the terrifying darkness outside to the warm and lit safety of our home was jarring. I was still questioning what happened, and I could tell my sister was too. I asked her what she had seen, what she might have heard, and she told me there had been a man standing at the edge of one of the driveways. We had walked right by him on the way back. She said that while we were behind the hotel, he crossed the street and followed us, gaining on us even though we were walking fast. She couldn't understand why someone would be standing out in such a dark, wooded area, just lurking, if they didn't possibly have ill intent. Honestly, I'm still not sure what happened that night. I'm uncertain about how much of what my sister said was true or if maybe she was just seeing things. One thing is for sure though, I definitely prefer visiting that harbor during the daylight. Let me start with a bit of background. I live in a small town in Finland with a population of about 300 people. Most of us are factory workers or elderly residents. During the summer, the town is lively with tourists, but in the winter, it becomes a bit of a ghost town. I work as a bartender in our town's pub, which remains open even during the quiet winter months to provide a place for people to gather and avoid loneliness. On a normal winter Friday evening, the pub was quiet and cold. Only a few locals were in there that night enjoying themselves, playing tunes on the jukebox and having some drinks while I tended to the fire in the fireplace. The snow had just started to fall heavily about an hour before closing. I closed up the pub as usual, cleaned up, and started about the paperwork. Our pub closes at 2 a.m., and by around 3 a.m. I heard a series of loud bangs coming from the staff door. It sounded like someone was in desperate need of help. I approached the door cautiously, and then I heard a man's voice shouting, "Please help me. Open the door. Is anyone there?" My immediate thought was that it could be a trick. Perhaps someone trying to rob us since we are so far from everything. But it could also be that someone is in genuine danger, maybe from a wild animal or some other detrimental situation. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept behind the bar for emergencies and cautiously went to open the door. The man rushed inside and I quickly closed the door behind him to ensure nothing else followed. I recognized him as one of the locals, a man that I knew had a severe alcohol problem. He was wearing only regular clothes and no winter gear, which made him look very cold. He then began speaking so rapidly that I had trouble understanding him. When I asked him to slow down, he just said, "Rubber faces. Rubber faces, they're chasing me. Please help me." Although I thought he might just be very intoxicated, there was something in his eyes that made me believe he was truly terrified. I couldn't see outside clearly due to the heavy snow and lack of streetlights. Despite the late hours of the night, I deemed this an emergency and decided to call the woman who was a good friend of this man and ask if she could come pick him up. She agreed to come over quickly since she lived nearby. The man continued to pace and mumble about these rubber faces as we waited. The woman soon arrived and took him to her place for the night. She explained that he was likely having a reaction to his medication and would be safer at her home. Relieved, I finished the paperwork and prepared to go home myself. However, I couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling about these rubber faces and the overall strange and unusual encounter. As I walked the short distance home, I took the baseball bat and flashlight with me due to the dark and snowy conditions. But when I reached the road next to the pub, I noticed footprints in the snow. There were tracks leading to the pub, but 3 additional sets of now distorted footprints due to the weather seemed to be following the initial ones. My heart raced as I heard a loud snapping branch from the forest just nearby. In a panic, I ran home as fast as I could, without looking back even a second. To this day, the encounter with the man and the footprints in the snow still haunt me. I don't know what those footprints meant or what was lurking in the forest, but regardless of what was going on that night, I'm beyond grateful that I never came face to face with those rubber faces the man claimed to have been seeing. When I was younger, my sister Zoe, my dad, stepmother, and her 2 daughters, Jade, who was my age, and Maddie, who was Zoe's age, went on a camping trip. We'd only been there a day when my sisters and I decided to explore a stream nearby. My dad gave us a walkie-talkie to stay in touch while we were gone. The path to the stream was narrow, surrounded by thick brush, and it felt almost like we were stepping into a different world as we followed it. Once we got there, we spent some time splashing in the water, enjoying the peace and quiet. That's when Jade suddenly froze and pointed toward the trees. She said she saw someone just standing there. I looked up, and sure enough, there was a figure, tall, dark, and watching us. It was human-shaped, but I couldn't make out any details. It was almost like a shadow, but in broad daylight. After a few seconds, it just vanished, back into the trees. All of us were spooked, but we tried our best to shrug it off and go about playing in the water. Still, I couldn't shake the uneasiness that seeing that gave me. The unknowns of the situation started to eat away at my mind. Every now and then I'd glance back at the spot where we saw the figure, and after a while it appeared again, silent and still, just standing there inside the tree line. This time everything around us seemed all too quiet. The usual sounds of the stream and the wind and the trees were almost muffled, like something had started to cease the ambience. None of us said a word, but we all felt it. The tension hung in the air. Eventually, we decided it was time to head back, so I started quickly walking ahead, my sisters lingering behind. I was about 20 meters ahead when I heard something rustling in the brush beside me. With my mind only going toward that figure we had seen earlier, I started to break out into a run. The only thought in my mind was for us all to escape and get away from that area. I did a quick check behind and saw my sisters keeping up the pace with me. The whole way back, we felt like we were being chased, like something was stalking us. We didn't stop until we burst into the open campground, where the sight of tents and people finally made us feel safe. When my sisters asked me why I started running, I told them what I saw and what I heard beside me. They told me that they didn't hear or see anything again, but I know in the beginning we all saw the same figure. For the rest of the trip, we didn't talk about it again, but now and then I'd catch a glimpse of something dark, far off in the distance. It never got close again, but I could never quite shake the feeling that we weren't alone.